Cut. That was a lot. So, yeah, CWA District 3. I just have to really recognize Richard because he is a relatively new vice president, recently reelected to a second term too, but turning around the South and bringing everyone together and being smart enough to bring in Angie Wells to serve as the administrative director for CWA District 3. Let me just say, Angie Wells is a United Flight Attendant and has respect all up and down the coast here in the South for all of her actions and work with Reverend Barber on Moral Mondays. So I am super excited because there's a lot of flight attendants in the room tonight. And we are going to hear from Daniel Hanley later, who's getting an award, but his mom is a United Flight Attendant. And we also have, there she is scooting around back there. Oh, she's trying to scoot up. Jenny Lane is a Delta Airlines flight attendant. And so I really, Councilman Khalid, you set the bar here real high. I'm going to try to meet it, but it is really extraordinary to have your leadership here in Atlanta and bringing together this youthful group who can push DSA forward in Atlanta and bring us together as a community and make the most out of organizing and people fighting together. And I just a little while ago told Representative Shannon how much of a hero she is to me, putting her body on the line for all women's bodies. Thank you. And every time we stand up like that, other people think they can stand up too. So using your power, build power right here in Atlanta. Thank you. So, and then Milt Tamber autographed his book for me, so my heart is full tonight. Now, solidarity is a force stronger than gravity. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
It lifts us up. And my union of flight attendants, 50,000 flight attendants at 20 different airlines, some flying over us right now, raining down solidarity on this event tonight, was first formed in 1945. Because the flight attendant job was first designed by Ellen Church, who was a commercial pilot, or wanted to serve as a commercial pilot. But she was told by airline executives that no, women are too emotional to work in the cockpit. So instead she said, well, I'm also a registered nurse. I have all these credentials. And, since we're flying at between 10 and 12,000 feet and it's real bumpy back there and the men are having a hard time, why don't you have women in the plane to care for them and help the emotional men through the experience? And so our profession was born. But the Association of Flight Attendants immediately went to work. Our predecessor union organized with the pilots union and went to work to beat back all those discriminatory practices that said that if you got too old or too ugly or too pregnant or too much weight or if you couldn't be a man, and all of those issues were beat back by our union, pushing forward for equality for women. And what that allowed me to do as a new flight attendant was to hear from one of my flying partners in my first few days on the job, when I saw a 35-year flight attendant get into an argument with a supervisor in the office, and she won. It was over a contractual provision. And then she pulled me aside and she said, listen, management thinks of us as their wives or their mistresses, and in either case, they hold us in contempt. Your only place of worth is with your fellow flying partners, and if we stick together, there's nothing we can't accomplish. And so it's with that spirit that we took on Big Tobacco and won. It's with that spirit that we built the flight attendant career and made it something that even men could have the same rights as women on the job. And it's with that spirit that we said we would not work flights that would facilitate the administration's evil policy of family separation. We always figured as union flight attendants that we had to cut our own path and make our own way. We didn't ever expect anyone to do that for us. When the Me Too movement broke, I said to my staff, I said, people are going to start calling the office because they're going to be looking around saying, well, who's been sexually harassed? Let's call the flight attendants. And sure enough, we got those calls, and for the first time, we were actually able to tell our stories, and people might care about that, and people might want to do something about that. That was a pretty extraordinary thing, so we started asking people to tell their stories, and one story that I heard was that it was actually a man who is a friend of mine who works as a flight attendant. He said, you know, I was working this flight from San Francisco to Sydney, and in the middle of the flight, I was working in the galley and preparing for the next service, and I turned around and looked into the aisle, and there's my fellow flying partner. She's walking through the business class cabin, and he watched as some man reached out and grabbed her rear end. And he's getting ready to go, like, kill this guy. But the flight attendant whips around and she says, you! If you were half as good looking as you think you are, you might stand a chance, but you're not. So you sit down and you don't touch anyone else again. And then she turns around to my friend and she says, and you, I don't need your help. You're a man. I can take care of myself. So we always carved our own path and made our own way. But I heard that emotional line again in 2013 when TSA said that knives could come back on the plane. And knives were taken off the plane because my good friends on Flight 175 died. And we were not going to allow that to happen again. So we ran a campaign immediately to reverse this national security policy that had been put out to say, we have to change this because it's for the best interest of the country that we allow knives back on so we can look for bombs. Can't do both at the same time. But anyway, so here we were making this impassioned plea and building a coalition of people. And I'm sitting in a senator's office, and the Senate staffer reaches over to me, taps me on the arm, and kind of rubs it a little bit after I had just put forward a very well laid out argument with law enforcement arguments about why we shouldn't have these knives on the plane. And he said, I know this is a very emotional issue. And I was thinking in my head, well, I'd stab you right now, except they took my knife when I came into your workplace. But I didn't. I went back to the CWA office, and Larry Cohen was president at the time. Anybody know Larry Cohen? Yeah. And I said to Larry, I said, this isn't about knives, this is about sexism, and we're never going to win that. And he said, Sarah, your friends died. I'm going to not quite use the expletives that he used, but he said, you go back up there and you tell those sons of what's that my friends died and I'm not leaving here until this policy changes. And so 2 days later we won. And in a 90-day campaign, turned that totally around. But what I've really learned then, and also with the stand that we took during the shutdown, is that women, if anybody calls you emotional, that is not a detriment, that is your superpower. Because what it means is, I'm gonna fight like hell, and I'm not gonna give up because it comes from my heart. So evil dictators intent on controlling everything and stripping all people of our rights start with belittling women and treating women as less than human. Right. Which is why I'm so happy that Labor organized to turn out the vote in Virginia, and we're going to get a vote finally for the ERA, and women are going to be equal. Now, to put it in perspective for anybody who doesn't understand why this is important, let me just put it this way. Imagine a world where we had a woman who was president of the AFA-CWA. And the vast majority of people sitting around the executive council were also women. And we passed a resolution to form a men's committee so we could address the issue. So, what we have to take in is that racism and sexism have been the premier tactic of the boss to hold us down. More than 100 years ago, Frederick Douglass told us all we need to know today. He said the difference between the white slave and the black slave was this: the latter belonged to one slaveholder and the former belonged to the slaveholders collectively. Both were plundered and by the same plunderers. The white laboring man was robbed by the slave system of the just results of his labor because he was flung into competition with a class of laborers who worked without wages. The slaveholders blinded them to this competition by keeping alive their prejudice against the slaves as men, not against them as slaves. So union siblings, we have work to do to fulfill what we need to have done that Frederick Douglass opened our eyes to more than 100 years ago. Wouldn't we be stronger if we saw fear of someone else as a tactic by the powerful to divide the working class? Wouldn't we be better if people different from ourselves raised our curiosity and we asked them to tell their stories? And this happens on the picket line, and this is possible in a sustained structure of our unions. Eugene Debs said, 10,000 times has the labor movement stumbled and fallen and bruised itself and risen again, then seized by the throat and choked and clubbed into insensibility, enjoined by the courts, assaulted by thugs, charged by the militia, shot down by regulars, traduced by the press, frowned upon by public opinion, deceived by politicians, threatened by priests, repudiated by renegades, preyed upon by grafters, infested by spies, deserted by cowards, betrayed by traitors, led by leeches, and sold out by leaders. But notwithstanding all of this, and all of the, it is today the most vital and potential power this planet has ever known. And its historic mission of emancipating the workers of the world from the thraldom of ages is as certain of ultimate realization as the setting of the sun. So that's our job today, to find and make true that realization. And on Friday, a week ago, we announced a union of 50,000 members that we are going to take on an organizing campaign at Delta Airlines to organize the flight attendants 25,000. The outpouring of support and excitement has been extraordinary. Now, I will tell you, I came down to Atlanta several years ago for another event, and I came down with my crew badge on, and I was going through security, and someone in the line at National, who was also flying to Atlanta, saw my crew badge and treated me horribly. She said, "Get out of my way. Staff shouldn't go before me." And there was this idea that some jobs are worth more than other jobs. And I thought about that all the way down to Atlanta. And then I walked through the airport, and I went up to a couple concession stands, and I saw the people cleaning the bathrooms, and the people sweeping up the concourses, and taking the garbage out. And they all had their heads down. And I was conscious to it because of what I had just experienced. But I remember thinking at the time, this has got to change. And it can change by starting to organize flight attendants, because we have more contact with the world than almost any other profession. We can talk to people and we can change their minds, and we've got to bring people together to be able to do that. Because we cannot have people going through life feeling like they're not worth it. The labor movement says to all working people, you are worth it. And that's what we're going to do. So we were out on social media, and I was walking the concourses in Atlanta. We had an extraordinary response. We had people who were coming to the airport in their pajamas saying, "I saw this on Facebook and I had to come here and sign a card right away." Wow. And I heard from a flight attendant 2 nights ago. She reached out to me through Facebook, private messaging, and DMs, and she said, you know, I've never been for the union. I've never talked about the union with anyone. I've been afraid to say the word. But she said, I've also been taking in lately that I'm afraid at work all day long, every day. And it's crushing. And when I saw you there in the concourse, walking in the space, that I feel fear every single day, and that I feel like I can't breathe. And there you were walking there. She said, I just have to tell you that it changed everything in my life. Because all of a sudden, I feel like I can have power, and I can have a say in my workplace, and I want to be a part of this organizing drive. And so using power builds power, and Delta didn't know what to do. They had supervisors running all over the place. What are we going to do? But none of them approached us, and I approached them and said, hey, let's talk. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to lift people up and help them find their own power. Now, we have to do that because we have to take on big issues. We have to take on issues like Medicare for all, because everyone should have the right to have health care. And let's stop. And let's stop talking about how much it's going to cost. Let's talk about what it's going to cost us not to do this, right? Walter Reuther talked about this long ago. He said that we should have universal health care over 50 years ago. And so unions have always set the marker by negotiating in our contracts. But our union density has declined. And so, at the same time, has healthcare. And we have not reached that final goal of having universal healthcare for everyone in this country. Tommy Douglas got it done long ago in Canada, and we need to get it done now, and we are right on the brink. And if anyone says that union members are against non-union members on this issue, then they do not understand what unions are about, because an injury to one is an injury to all, and we are going to lift people up. So the capitalists say there is no need of labor organizing, but the fact that they themselves are continually organizing shows their real moves. The capitalists want the most labor for the least money. The laborers want the most money for the least labor. Workers produce wealth and build the world's palaces, but they neither use the wealth nor dwell in the palaces. If you would only realize that you hold the whole solution of the whole problem in your own hands, you could settle the whole question easily. If, for instance, instead of striking in small groups, every industry in America were to hold up, the capitalists would be obliged to yield to any and all demands, for the world could simply not go on. Now, those aren't my words, although they feel really good on my tongue. They were spoken by Mother Jones in Greensboro, North Carolina, in February of 1906, as she crisscrossed the country, urging us to unite as one against the factory owner and the railroad barons and the coal companies, to reclaim our labor, defend our children, and take ownership of our own future. Now, I know also that I'm here in no small part because 10 months ago I uttered the words general strike, the very act that Mother Jones phrases in that passage I just read. And the funny thing that most people don't remember is that I didn't actually call for a general strike. I just said that with 800,000 of our federal sector sisters and brothers locked out or forced to come to work without pay, and another 1 million contract workers furloughed with no end in sight, and the rest of us going to work in an increasingly unsafe environment with risks to our lives, that maybe it was time for the labor movement to talk about one. But even that small act, a national union president saying we should talk about a general strike, was enough to send shockwaves through labor and politics. The GOP didn't know what to do, and the Democrats were shocked that somebody was standing up. And everybody was abuzz, except one person who really wanted to question me. What the hell did I think I was doing? And was I really going to do it? And was I really going to have labor with me? And that person is in this room tonight. His name is Hamilton Nolan. And I think it's really important that we know at this point in time that our labor movement is moving and thriving because of the incredible organizing that's been going on in the media sector. Even in the face of private equity, dirty, greedy, no-good bastards who have been closing shops, right? But I also want to note that we have to recognize that when we question each other, we do better. When we have discussion and debate, we do better. And I can tell you right now that Hamilton's posture during the shutdown towards me absolutely made me better because I was friggin' gonna prove him wrong. So, a free press that questions us and keeps us on our toes is as important to our democracy and moving us forward than almost any other thing we have going in this country. And we have to stand up for our sisters and brothers. So this is also, is anybody aware of this, the anniversary of the founding of the CIO today? Wow. Today! 1935, John Lewis took Mother's words to heart when he landed the punch at the 1935 AFL convention that birthed the CIO and organized the vast majority of unions today, including the United Auto Workers and the Steel Workers, and in 10 years alone, they organized 6 million workers. Wow. And if we do that at that rate today, we can rebuild this movement and totally change our world. If they took on creative tactics, they did sit-down strikes, and they were totally, completely committed to organizing. Just like the teachers in Chicago who conducted rank-and-file organizing to build power and took us out of the wilderness in 2012 and took us even higher just now this month. So I think about what management did to organize for their benefit in the wake of 9/11 when I watched the debate over tackling the climate crisis. A moment Mother would have understood implicitly. When she gave that speech I started with, Mother was storming the country to organize people not just for a fair wage or safe working conditions. At that time, her biggest goal was to end child labor. It's hard to imagine where we sit today that just over 100 years ago, the children of the working class were sent to factories as young as 6 or 7 years old, some working 14 hours a day for 25 cents a week. Mother said, let us take the children away from this God-cursed labor and put them out in the fresh air and sunshine where they may develop into a nobler race of men and women and build up the ideal civilization with peace and goodwill. She traveled the country speaking of the evil of child labor, not just for the children's lives destroyed in her day, but for the horrors it meant for our collective future. And today, we have a new fight to save our future for our children, to preserve the world of fresh air and sunshine. And I want to be crystal clear on this. We all need to be crystal clear on this. The capitalists are organizing for the coming climate emergency. They never let a crisis go to waste. Today, working people have two choices. We can either come together, find solutions that give us all a fair shot and preserve our future, the future of our environment, or we can allow the wealthy and powerful to use hate and fear to divide us. We can fight amongst one another. We can allow the wealthy and powerful to exploit our labor and ravage our land until it's too late. And then the wealthy and powerful will use the crisis of their own creation to squeeze us harder than they've ever squeezed us before. And you don't have to look to the future to see what the second option looks like. It's alive and happening right now today. The people who suffer from industrial pollution are today, and always have been, working people. From the black children in Detroit choking on the toxins from a massive oil refinery, to the Navajo children poisoned by uranium. In Louisiana, the native communities in the Delta became our country's first climate refugees when a combination of logging, oil extraction, and rising waters made the Ile de Jean Charles unlivable. I saw it when I worked as a crew member on the AFA-CWA Puerto Rico relief mission return trip. Families who had lost their homes, their jobs, and everything they owned boarded our plane with children whose bodies were swollen with mosquito bites. I can hear their sweet gracias as we handed them the first hot meal they'd seen in 10 days and flew away from the island that would no longer be their home. The capitalists want us to think these are limited cases, or in the most cynical efforts, tell that we shouldn't worry about that because those people don't look like us. But you don't have to look far to see that this is something we will all face. Right now, and within the past month in California, in places like Berkeley and Napa Valley, power was shut off to 100,000 households. People needing therapeutic oxygen died. More than 2.5 million people sitting in the dark because the fire risk is so high. The power company stopped transmission lines rather than risk a spark. And why is the fire risk so high? Because the West is drying out. Now annual wildfires burn in temperate rainforests outside Seattle. And Lake Mead is dropping every year as the snowpack in the Rockies vanishes. At the same time, prime farmland across the Midwest was drowned this spring in yet another 100-year flood. Seawater flooded the streets of Miami for days in a row just a little over a month ago. And this summer, the Arctic and the Amazon are burning. We have no time to waste, because make no mistake, the capitalists are organizing, we must too.
Yeah.
If we're going to thrive, if we're going to see our fortunes rise and our futures bright, we have to be willing to risk what we have in order to fight for something better. We can't allow ourselves to be constrained by the ruling class artificial constraints. Mother said, "I'm not a humanitarian, I'm a hellraiser." No matter what the fight, don't be ladylike. God Almighty made women, and Rockefeller and his gang of thieves made the ladies. She wasn't afraid to break convention, and we can't be either. In Arnott, Pennsylvania, workers who had been on strike against the coal barons for months asked her to come and help them. When she arrived, the workers had prepared to end the strike. She urged them on. Then the company brought in the scabs, and in her own words, what happened next? "I told the men to stay home, with the children for a change, and let the women attend to the scabs. I organized an army of women housekeepers. On a given day, they were to bring their mops and brooms, and the army would charge the scabs up the mines. The general manager, the sheriff, and the corporation hirelings heard of our plans and were on hand. The day came, and the women came with their mops and brooms and pails of water. I decided not to go up to the drip mouth myself, for I knew they would arrest me, and that might rout the army. I selected a leader, an Irish woman who had the most picturesque appearance. She had slept late, and her husband had told her to hurry up and get into the army. She had grabbed a red petticoat and slipped it over a thick cotton nightgown, and she wore a black stocking and a white one. She had tied a little red fringed shawl over her wild hair. Her face was red, and her eyes were mad. And I looked at her, and I felt that she could raise a rumpus. I said, "You lead the army up to the drip mouth. Take that tin dishpan you have with you and your hammer, and when the scabs and the mules come up, begin to hammer and howl. Then, all of you, hammer and howl and be ready to chase the scabs with your mops and brooms. Don't be afraid of anyone." Up the mountainside, yelling and hollering, she led the women. And when the mules came up with the scabs and the coal, she began beating on the dishpan and hollering, and all the army joined in with her. And the sheriff tapped her on the shoulder and said, "My dear lady," he said, "remember the mules. Don't frighten the mules." Because at the time, if you know your labor history, the mule was more important than the man in the mine. She took the old tin pan and she hit him with it and she hollered, "To hell with you and the mules! To hell with you and the mules!" And they won that strike. You have to use creative tactics. You have to take them off their game, and we can do that. I've been in a lot of boardrooms, and I'm going to tell you, these people do not have the corner on smarts. The ruling class puts rules in place, civility, decorum, to hold us back. They give us just enough to make us think that we have something real to lose. And if we're not willing to break those rules, they will continue to take until there's nothing left. Now, today is an extraordinary day. It's not only the birth of the CIO, but today we get to celebrate Lula Libra. Lula is free. And in his own words, after fighting for the working class and being imprisoned for fighting for the working class, he said, "They did not imprison a man, they tried to kill an idea." Brazil did not improve, Brazil got worse. The people are going hungry, the people are unemployed, the people do not have formal jobs. People are working for Uber, they are riding bikes to deliver pizzas. This sounds like what's going on everywhere in the way that we're defining work as less than something else, in the way that we're defining two-tier classes of workers so that some cannot have rights. Closer to home, Amazon thought they could just buy the Seattle City Council after the city dared to enact a $15 minimum wage, because of course paying workers $15 an hour might cut into Jeff Bezos' fortune, which grew at almost $2,500 per second last year. Trying to override the will of the voters in Seattle, Amazon sought to unseat progressive city council members like Shama Sawant and prevent pro-worker candidates like Sean Scott from winning office. In total, Amazon donated $1.45 million just in the last month alone to elect its hand-picked candidates this year in the city with the mega corporation that the mega corporation calls home. But I have happy news tonight. Shama Sawant turned the corner yesterday as the absentee ballots were counted, and today she has declared victory for the working people. Scott's race is still too close to call, but he's closing in on victory with more votes to be counted. And what does it all mean? It means when workers use our voices, we win. It means that there is no savior. It means that we have to save ourselves. They may have all the money, almost unlimited money in Amazon's case, but we have the power of our numbers, and our solidarity is our power. So flight attendants fly to every corner of this earth, when some can only dream of crossing borders. Our work is the very symbol of freedom, and we have more contact with the public than almost any other work group. We have a responsibility to connect people, and we fill it. We have to tell the story of our labor history and the struggle of workers, and the good that can be created when we build our units. When women and people of color and young people not only join unions, but run unions. And so, I want you to join us in organizing Delta Flight Attendants. And we already have, I spoke at Columbia earlier this week, Columbia University, and one of the professors there is on book tour. And she took union authorization cards with her and union pins, and she has already signed up 10 people. And she asked us to send more to her. So you can do a lot to help with this organizing drive. What we're hearing from Delta Flight Attendants already, and give me an amen, Joni.
Amen!
Is that they're overwhelmed with the support that they're getting.
Wow.
And they have been told forever that unions are evil, that they should fear it, that they should be fearful of saying the word. So the support from you is extraordinary, and you can go to deltaafa.org and sign up to get an activist packet sent to your home. So if you're going to be flying, we'll send you union pins and union cards, and you can talk with Delta Flight Attendants, and you can raise this up on social media in the meantime, and we ask you for your help to do that. It means the world to the flight attendants, and we're going to give it back to you 100-fold, because when we have 100,000 flight attendants in our union, informed, involved, activated, we are going to spread the union message all over this world and build power for working people. So I was watching a program recently about Woody Guthrie, and Arlo Guthrie was talking about the songs that must be sung, giving special recognition to "This land is your land." He said, people identify with the song because it's give and take. That what you want for yourself, you're willing to want for somebody else, even if they are different from you. That's the thing that's uniquely American. That's the thing that keeps us going as a nation, and that's the thing that is in most danger right now, and it's the most important right now. I think people don't just enjoy singing the songs, they enjoy the feeling they get when they are able to express themselves, that what I want for myself, I want for you too. We need to rekindle that spirit, and in that hope, I keep singing the song. So I'm going to ask you to sing it with me. So why don't you stand up, because you can flex your muscles like this. All right. This land is your land, this land is mine. From California to the York Islands, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land is made for you and me. Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking that freedom highway. Nobody living can ever make me turn back. This land